They stole the Castiglione emerald? From the Milanese nightingale herself? What? Look, I gotta go. Okay, bye. Hey.
Hey. Yeah. This month's main headline, Government under Chancellor Muller resigns. Dr. Heinrich Brüning to form a new coalition.
The weapons must act. Democracy is at an impasse.
The failure of the coalition is blamed on social democracy.
What is happening here is a consolidation of the so-called genuinely conservative forces in the parliament. The entire nation demands imperatively a forceful state policy, if necessary, even against the parliament.
Any attempt that continues the failed tax laws with the help of Article 48 will encounter the sharpest and most resolute opposition from the right.
I'm Indy Neidell.
I'm Spartacus Olsson.
And this is The Rise of Hitler. Welcome to the Weimar Wire with the March month's most momentous moments. Stay tuned for the best and most complete update about what is happening in and around Germany. But first, let's briefly recap what's happened in February.
Hamburg got turned into a battle zone after a confrontation between police officers and the unemployed turned ugly, and a violent protest engulfed the entire city.
Tensions between Germany and Poland grew because of disagreements about their future economic relationship and the discrimination against some ethnic Germans on formerly German territory.
The German parliament failed to reach an agreement regarding the financial reforms to address ever-widening deficits in the federal budget.
Some even argued the political problems were so great that a change in government was not out of the question.
And on an international note, the London Naval Conference descended into loud quarreling and failed to reach any agreement.
As for politics, February had no federal or state-level elections or any other real political upheavals, something that changes dramatically this month, as you might guess from our top headline.
And this is shown in the Weimar Wire Political Indicator, brought to you by
Time Ghost,
tracking popularity trends each month. This month's developments shake the Weimar Republic to its core. As a result, the former ruling coalition continues its downward trend, with the SPD suffering most as they are called responsible for the collapse of the government.
Parts of the Bürger Bloc, also part of the failing government coalition, are in something of a catch-22. While they are seen as part of the reason behind government failure, they're also to be part of the new government under certain special provisions. So their trend is somewhat neutral, maybe slightly negative.
As always, times of uncertainty and political change are very welcome at the ends of the political spectrum.
So, unsurprisingly, the Nazis and the Communists are still on the up and up. They have been the loudest critics of the former Grand Coalition, and now with its collapse, see themselves proven right.
A change of government? What on earth happened there?
Good question, and we will get right back to it, but first, the other big headlines from Germany and around the world for the month of March.
On International Unemployment Day, communists take to the streets worldwide. In Germany, their hunger marches are met by police.
A surprise attack on the Reichsbank. 50 Nazis shoot up a restaurant in a small town near Berlin.
Mahatma Gandhi leads a march of protesters against the British salt monopoly.
Reichsbank's president Hjalmar Schacht resigns in protest to the Young Plan.
In the U.S., the unemployment rate reaches 20%, and the economy is in free fall.
The German Democrats switch into the opposition. The Young Plan is ratified nevertheless.
The Republic Protection Law is passed in the Reichstag, even while calls for a violent overthrow of the government grow louder and louder. The communists are amongst those making such calls.
The German economy is perhaps on the edge of entering a deeper recession. This development is not unique to Germany. Many other economies continue to experience economic hardship as well. There are some positive signs here, though, like the number of unemployed people and people receiving unemployment benefits is decreasing, but overall the economy is still reeling.
In this tense atmosphere, the communists feel the need to express their dissatisfaction, anger, and the suffering of their people. On March 6th, a long-planned initiative grips Weimar. It is not a German initiative, though. It is an international phenomenon.
Come out on March 6th, the International Day of Struggle of the Unemployed and Factory Workers. On this day, the proletariat in all capitalist countries will stand against the murderous rationalization, against the impoverishment of many millions of workers, their wives and children. Come out to fight against the hunger regime of the bourgeoisie and social fascism, for the revolutionary victory of the German proletariat, for Soviet Germany.
Disregarding bans against communist demonstrations, the communists take to the streets in cities all across Weimar: Berlin, Munich, Frankfurt, Cologne, and more. Considering the protest has long been planned and publicly advertised, though, the police are ready and waiting. From Berlin, the communists proudly report.
The police had to literally fight their way through until, after hours of hand-to-hand combat, they were able to occupy the Berlin Mitte employment office.
In some cases, when the police are reportedly heavily faced with protesters, they see no other choice than using force. The Berliner Volkszeitung reports. A procession of about 150 communists was marching along when, at the corner of Goethestrasse, a police van appeared. The officers immediately jumped from the car and tried to disperse the demonstrators with rubber batons. They initially succeeded, but then the demonstrators regrouped and actually attacked the police. They knocked down 2 policemen, and according to eyewitness reports, in the moment of utmost need, the police fired several live shots. As a result, a total of 6 civilians were seriously injured by gunfire.
Some policemen also suffer severe injuries, although none are fatal.
Towards the end of the day, the protesters managed to gain access to the government quarter at the heart of Berlin, another triumph in the eyes of the KPD.
How boastfully the police press announced that the inner city, especially the government quarter, would be hermetically sealed off, and suddenly they were there, as if sprung from the ground, thousands who pushed forward up to Unter den Linden. Yesterday proved once and for all that communists cannot be pushed off the streets any longer.
But the Vossische Zeitung reports something else. The reports coming from the Reich concerning the communist initiatives indicate that in general their marches failed in Frankfurt, Breslau, Cologne, and in the Ruhr region. Thursday passed peacefully. The attempts of the communists to drive their supporters onto the streets yesterday have failed.
In any case, whether a glorious triumph of the proletariat or a general failure, the Nazis do have some strong words for the agitators of the 6th of March. Here's a list of just the insults directed at the communists in one edition of Dr. Joseph Goebbels' Der Angriff on the same day. Sparty, you usually do the Nazis, but can I do this one?
Oh yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay. Red scum. Communist criminals, savage mob, the pathway to crime, beasts, ragtag scum, the scourge of creation, the face of crime, lower than the lowest of animals, the criminal vermin of dark Berlin, a depravity of entrepreneurship, a vile outcry of the subhuman, common malice, a bloodthirsty abomination, nothing human, grimace of the Jew, rabid ranting, the caterwauling of the Comintern. Overall, one must crush the communists to pulp.
The communists laconically reply,
Crushed to a pulp. Certainly, but not us. Hey, thanks, Cat.
It's copacetic, Goose. The Nazis do not satisfy themselves with peaceful protests either. While there are some of those, like at the premiere of Bertolt Brecht's play Rise and Fall of the City of Mahogany on the 9th in Leipzig, there are also incidents of orchestrated violence.
On March 5th, in a small town near Berlin called Röntgental, 2 groups hold meetings in the town's tavern, right? One is a tenants association who discuss their rents and the local gossip, and the other is a group of the Reichsbanner.
The Reichsbank is a political organization with the aim of protecting the Democratic Republic. It was founded in 1924 by members of the Social Democrats, the Christian Conservatives, and the German Democrats. Their banner is black, red, and gold, colors from the Napoleonic Wars.
They want to defend Germany and its values of unity, justice, and liberty. It's not just a political organization, though, but also has a militia, the Kampfverband. According to Reichsbanner officials, this is a direct response to the Nazi militia, the SA, and its terror on the streets of Germany. Anyhow, around 10:30 that evening, sudden sharp whistles are heard from inside the tavern. This is how Vorwärts describes the following events.
It turned out later to be the attack signal of the National Socialist thugs. The Tenants Association occupied a brightly lit room for their meeting, with windows facing the street. Suddenly, several shots cracked outside. The windows shattered, and bullets whizzed around the heads of those present. Apparently, the attackers believed they were facing members of the local branch of the Reichsbank, who were actually in another room located at the back. The guests hurried to the street to see what was happening outside. This was the exact moment the National Socialists had been waiting for. They opened furious, rapid fire on the unsuspecting people. The first to fall was the worker Kubov, who was seriously hit by 2 bullets in the abdomen and back.
All in all, around 50 members of the SA, some reportedly in uniform, have assembled for this surprise attack. According to other reports, the single local policeman, once he sees the attackers, gets on his bicycle and leaves. Whether out of fear or out of allegiance to the cause remains unclear.
4 people are shot. Foreman Erich Ulich, hip wound, a member of the Reichsbank. Kurt Seifert, leg wound, a member of the Communist Youth. Cashier Gebauer, arm and leg wound, a member of the Social Democrats. And worker Kubov, abdominal wound and non-partisan.
While accounts differ regarding how the Nazis leave the scene of the crime, whether they take the train back to Berlin or whether they go to another restaurant in town where a Nazi rally is being held, the accounts agree that they get away scot-free.
A doctor at the local hospital says the injuries are very severe because they are inflicted by dum-dum bullets, hollow points designed to violently rip the insides of the target apart. Nevertheless, all but 1 victim are in recovery, though Kubov has died from his abdominal wound. The communists respond.
A murderous assault by the National Socialist criminals.
They also say this.
It is a profound symbol that there in Runkenthal, nonpartisan, communist, and social democratic workers collapse side by side under the bullets of the National Socialists. They work together, and they are collectively fought against by fascists. The blood that was shed in Runkenthal must be the step between proletarians of all factions. It's about the gathering of anti-fascist forces in the front of the revolutionary proletariat. The Nazis deny any involvement. In fact, they have a very different version of events.
Exposing the lies of the Berlin Jew press. Regarding the incident in Runkenthal, it is now known that only the Reichsbank fired shots which hit multiple civilians, like the worker Kubov. He was not a Reichsbank man, as the Jewish press alleges, but completely apolitical. The press claims are purely fabricated.
Another event this month shakes the state to its foundations. On March 7, 1930, the president of the German Federal Bank, the Reichsbank, Hjalmar Schacht, returns to the headlines because of his open opposition to the Young Plan, Germany's new reparations payment plan.
This time, he not only talks the talk, but also walks the walk and resigns from his post in protest. The government tries to talk him out of it, but no dice. The reactions vary.
On the left, it is primarily negative. The SPD reports,
he contradicts his statements that he would be obligated to participate in the work of the reparations bank. One can either, like Leonidas, faithfully defend Thermopylae according to the laws of Sparta, or withdraw grumblingly like Coriolanus, but one cannot combine both roles. Otherwise, one effect kills the other. Communists believe that
the resignation of the president will lead to a strengthening of the right-leaning members within the Center Party and the German People's Party.
In the center, it is somewhat of a mixed bag. Schacht was a good and useful commander, although he also, even if it happened unintentionally, fueled the fire of the radicals.
And to the Nazis, it gives cause for joy.
We welcome the fact that Dr. Schacht's move has torn the German public out of their illusion. For us, this means to fight against the young parties with renewed vigor until their downfall.
Another consequence of the resignation, perhaps a bit ironic, one day after the communist hunger marches, is that it caused turmoil in the German stock market, worsening the already tenuous economic situation.
Significant share price declines in all areas. Reichsbank shares recorded the most significant losses at 15.5%.
But Schacht's efforts are to no avail. The Reichstag ratifies the Young Plan on March 13th. Here too, though, political intrigue is at play.
The day before, the Bavarian People's Party, which has supported the plan, decides to abandon ship and join the opposition.
They also attempt to convince their sister party, Zentrum, the Catholic Conservatives, that the Center Party's approval of the Young Plan must be completely out of the question if it does not want to suffer an embarrassing moral and factual defeat.
Ultimately, Centrum does not heed their plea, and the Young Plan is passed 295 votes to 192, with 3 abstentions.
The Nazis have this to say about the developments.
The Centrum's Dolchstoß. The Center Party has once again remained true to its traditional policy of stabbing in the back. This is not an ordinary accident anymore, but an accident against better knowledge, a conscious betrayal. The Communists agree with the Nazis, at least insofar as they despise the Young Plan and its proponents.
The Slave Pact has been made law, selling the German people. We will unleash the revolutionary armed struggle and will not rest until a proletarian Soviet Germany breaks the chains of young slavery.
The parties in the Grand Coalition, on the other hand, support their policy. Now, there is a final determination of German debt. By June 30th, the Rhineland will be free of foreign troops. The time of uncertainty and doubt is over.
There is something that makes the day the Young Plan is passed special, I guess, if that's the word. Exactly 10 years ago this day was the Kapp Putsch, an attempt to destroy the young republic when it had barely begun, supported by prominent ex-military leaders and put into action by former soldiers and sailors. After 100 hours, it failed, and the republic prevailed. Some see a parallel between that attempted coup and the ratification of the Young Plan.
What a prospect for the German people, purified through hardship and suffering, who are well aware of the right path of the Young Plan, despite everything, despite it all. If it were just a matter of unscrupulous propaganda, the opposition should have long since gained the upper hand. That motley mix of radicals of all kinds, from communists to national socialists, their goal is the disruption and weakening of the democratic republic. No, it was not because of the individuals or the times that the Kapp Putsch became a sad tragedy, like now. It was because the German people bravely stood up for their constitution and walked the path of order, freedom, and action, despite Kapp, despite Hitler, despite the Bolsheviks and fascists, despite the heavy burdens, despite serious mistakes by political and economic leaders, despite hardship and deprivation. And now, enough strife. The work for peace and freedom continues.
For Minister of the Interior Karl Severing, the Putsch does not elicit any such romanticized nostalgia, but a painful reminder of fickle political reality. In his ears, the calls for violent revolution and the overthrow of the government ring louder and louder, echoing from the far right and far left corners of the Reich.
That is why he began advocating his revised Republic Protection Law back in January. Check out our coverage from 2 months ago to know more. And as of the 14th of March, the law goes into effect. It is anything but smooth sailing getting there, with the Nazis describing the scenes in the Reichstag as tumultuous.
In fact, the events are so tumultuous, we feel we should give you at least a piece of them in full. The most defining moment comes when Minister Severing defends the measure in his spirit of a state which sacrifices its protection, sacrifices itself.
Gentlemen, lately, most recently the day before yesterday, the Rote Fahne expressed about the current political situation that now the hour has come when initiative with arms will have decisive meaning. We communists see our task to be the proletarian initiative to arms, to raise the weaponized revolutionary struggle to its highest level and defeat the ruling regime. Gentlemen, I want to tell you all, in public and earnestly, that I'm supporting the protection law for the Reich, out of both personal conviction and on appeal by the states, because it's my interest that neither shall workers be herded into the guns of the police, nor shall police officers be wounded by or killed by workers. The adoption of this law will achieve that, of that you can be sure. The communist violent oppressors' reach for power will be noticeably tempered. It will make it impossible for the Rote Fahne to continue agitating in this tone. On September 2nd, 1929, Herr Goebbels wrote in his paper Der Angriff, "Is it then astonishing that in view of this madness we take to the battlefield to actively oppose the criminal regimes with all our might and help a tormented people finally rise? Plant the banner of resistance and rebellion to the streets." Gentlemen, you have no idea how silly these excuses make you look. Your member, Representative Strasser, told me yesterday that only idiots and criminals would spread the claim that the National Socialists were preparing for a putsch. I have no objections to this self-description. You see, I would bring to your attention that in October of last year, your colleague, Representative Wagner, spoke of how, for the Third Reich, this government's neck shall be broken and taken off. You said that it is a spiritual core. Should we then be hanged spiritually? How do you hang someone spiritually? I don't know what you mean when you speak of spiritual hanging and beheading. Will this spiritual struggle also be fought with hand grenades? There's a nice little song by the National Socialists about this. In Munich stood the first battle of our Brown Army. Who knows when the second battle calls to arms again? And to the sound of hand grenades, a man's heart laughs. It's not like I take these tirades all too seriously. I sort them in with all the rest. But what I'm saying about the communists also applies to you. When you run up and down the country and agitate against the Republic in this tone, and nothing happens other than some defamation lawsuits, then the impression will arise out there that all you have to do is march around a bit with National Socialists to tear down the Versailles guilt lie, overthrow the system, and fight a fun little war with the other side. To oppose this poisoning, this perversion of public opinion, is also a decisive goal of the law for the protection of the Reich. The attempts to infiltrate the Reich armed forces with these lies continue. I have right here the statement of someone who was subject to attempts of recruitment for this National Socialist cause. You'd like that, wouldn't you? The report makes clear that if we do not give the soldiers and the NSDAP better conditions, then the only way they can be placated is by the violent overthrow of the government. When you look at the general situation, the attacks by the right and the left, not only on the state and its form, but on the totality of public life, then you will not blame the government when in this last moment they ask of you this means of protection.
In the end, though, while all of the developments this month strain the Grand Coalition, they're not what breaks the camel's back.
As the month nears its end, the government has managed to check two crucial boxes on its to-do list: the ratification of the Young Plan and the passing of the Republic Protection Law. The Reich Protection Law, I should say.
However, one thing remains unsolved: the financial reform which should bring Weimar back on a course towards economic recovery and prosperity. There, the central point of contention is the unemployment insurance currently supporting millions of Germans.
The unemployment plan is not set up for the huge numbers of people currently in need. It was designed to support 1.5 million people at most. However, by the end of this month, that number is approaching 2.7 million, meaning the budget can no longer cover the costs, with a gap of roughly 100 million marks.
We should point out, however, that it's approaching 2.7 from the other end by decreasing from 3.2 million at the beginning of the year. In other words, unemployment is falling. At least in March. In any case, two parties on opposite sides of the Grand Coalition, the Social Democrats and the German Democrats, propose solutions to fix this issue. The former want to increase the insurance premium to cover the extra cost, while the latter want to reduce the services and save costs that way.
But ultimately, this cannot be resolved, and on the evening of the 27th, Reich Chancellor Muller leaves what will turn out to be the final negotiation session of his cabinet.
With his party deciding against any further compromises, the Chancellor has no choice but to approach President Paul von Hindenburg and give his resignation and the dissolution of the cabinet.
So, a new government needs to be formed. It is the president who officially appoints the chancellor. Thing is, for him to appoint a chancellor, he needs the parliament's approval of that candidate.
But there is no defined process for this approval because if the president appoints a chancellor the Reichstag does not want, it will immediately raise a vote of no confidence.
At this point, Dr. Brüning, the leading politician of the Christian conservatives, is, in the eyes of Hindenburg and Kurt von Schleicher, the chief of the armed forces, the man for the job.
So Hindenburg immediately charges Brüning with forming a new cabinet. But this cabinet is to have certain features. It is not to be built on the basis of coalition-like ties and has to exclude the Social Democrats, pushing them into the opposition.
The other parties soon catch on to what this means, Our sources claim that the President of the Reich has promised Dr. Brüning to use the powers from Article 48 of the Constitution and potentially order the dissolution of the Reichstag in the event that a majority for the tax proposals cannot be found another way.
Article 48 of the German Constitution is the reason some call the president a substitute emperor. It reads, "The President of the Reich may, if public security and order are significantly disturbed or endangered, take the measures necessary to restore public safety and order, if necessary, with the help of the armed forces. For this purpose, he may temporarily suspend all or some of the fundamental rights."
When, how, and if any current situation constitutes a state of emergency is also up to the president. As the month ends, as Brüning forms a new government, whether these emergency powers will be used is still up in the air. It all hinges on whether or not Brüning can get a majority in the Reichstag. We will likely find out in the coming weeks.
So what do you think? How will the political situation develop next month?
Will the communists and Nazis further increase the violence in the streets?
Will calls for the violent overthrow of the government grow louder?
Will the newly ratified Reich Protection Law help stop that?
And can Brüning form a new government?
Will he be able to get a majority in the Reichstag, or will Hindenburg invoke Article 48?
Is a minority government maybe the future norm or just a fleeting trend?
Well, we'll find out at least a few answers in April. So see you in a month. Weimar Wire out. Excelsior!